Right. I got this right at 1 o'clock Mountain Time. That's where we are, not here in Colorado. Um, we're going to get started. So if people, pop in as we progress forward, it's totally fine. You pick up right where we are. My name is Tom Woods with a company called R2 Sports Technology. And appreciate you guys taking a few minutes to join us here. What we're going to do in the next 30 minutes, I'm going to walk you through some material. But before we do that, I was going to give a little bit of a preamble just to kind of set the stage as to who I am, who we are, where we're coming from, what this is really all about. I mentioned my name is Tom Woods, company's R2 Sports Technology. The thing I always want people to understand when I talk to football coaches is that I am not a football coach. I have never been a football coach. I'm not some ex-coach. I'm not an aspiring coach. I'm a data guy. We happen to have been working with football teams for about 10 plus years now, but I myself am not a coach. So as we share things, I'm going to share a lot of things with you today from a pure data person's perspective, not from a coach's perspective. And I have a lot of respect for what you all do as coaches. And there's a big difference between looking at some data like we'll look at today and actually getting a bunch of young guys to actually do things right and win a football game. I respect the fact that those are two very different things. So try and stay in my lane, but we'll be sharing things with you again from a purely data perspective today. The other thing I want to kind of address, just the elephant in the room that can kind of be there with a session like this. We are R2 Sports Technology. We are a for-profit company. So we like doing business and we like making money, and that's what we like to do. But this is not a veiled sales pitch. Our intent here is to give you some very real information that can make a difference for you, we hope. And whether we ever cross paths again after 30 minutes from now, we hope you have something here that you can go and make you a better coach with what you're doing with data. So with that said, we'll kind of dive into things. The topic we're going to look at, and this is the first time we've ever done this as a company here, this is a new topic for us to address, is how you optimize your data for spring football. And here we are sitting. As this is being recorded, it's the beginning of February here. You're about to venture into this off-season time frame, and college teams in particular are going to be doing a lot of spring football work coming up. The point of what we're going to try and communicate to you today is that what you do here in the spring has to make a very tangible, very real difference to what happens on week 1 at the end of August next summer when you're getting ready to start your season. And too often there's a kind of a disconnect between the two. And especially when we start talking about what's going on from a data standpoint in the spring, spring's kind of the Wild West again, because there's not a whole lot of conventions in terms of how guys are breaking down film. I mean, it's one thing when you're playing games and you look at a bunch of game film and you're like, okay, here's down, distance, formation. It's very structured in what you're doing from a data collection standpoint. And if you're a major college program or professional team, you've got Pro Football Focus with all its condition done data. And then you enter spring where everybody's a little bit different. And it's like this wild card of what's going on out there. But what you're trying to do is actually improve so that you can go win games in the fall. And so what we're going to look at today are some things from our perspective that are good data conventions to help you make a direct link from what you do in the off season, so that when it comes time to start playing on week 1, you already know with a far greater degree of certainty what to expect or not. So what we're going to do is we're going to start theoretically. We're going to take a few minutes and talk theory, and then we're going to go from theory right into practice. So in this, and we got 30 minutes. And then what we do when we get to the bottom of the hour, we'll wrap up. If you want to stick around and ask questions and spend a little more time looking at things, by all means, we can absolutely do that. But over the next 30 minutes, so we're gonna attack this in 2 ways. And so we're gonna start from a theoretical standpoint. I don't want to get too lost in the clouds in terms of theory, but we want to kind of outline for you some key things you need to think about from a data standpoint. And then I'm going to show you some very mechanical things that you can do to make things better for you in spring. So let's talk theory for a second. First thing first, we encourage guys, when you're talking about what you're doing, and we use the term spring, it is spring football data, but I say the same things that we're talking about here apply to any kind of off-season program. So even if this is work you're doing in the summer or as you come into your preseason camp, same kind of thing applies. So we encourage guys, you got to work backwards from week 1. And what we mean from that everything that you do in the spring has to be very intense. And some of this is Captain Obvious stuff. You may shake your head like, well, yeah, no joke, but this is kind of a key thing from a data standpoint, at least. Everything you're doing in the spring has to be planned very intentionally to support what you're going to be doing on week one in the fall. Okay. So you have to justify, and one of the things we're going to show you here in a little bit is going to force you to have to kind of justify the things you're doing. A lot of times we can fall into a habit of just, I've done this for as long as I can remember. This is what I do. I'm a football coach, so I do what I do. You have to kind of step back for a second and say, okay, here's what the construct of what our spring program is going to be. Does it make sense in light of what you're trying to be on week one? So always be working backwards from that. As you're getting ready to play your first game, you're thinking about game planning. You're thinking about concepts that you want to use. You're thinking about the type of team you want to be. We're going to run a ton of inside zone. That's who we want to be this year. If you're thinking like that, that's what you're getting ready for in week one, then your spring program needs to be structured in a way to support that. Okay, not just do what we do, but structure it with a direct line to who you want to be on week one. That's a philosophical thing that I want you to keep in mind when we start thinking about what matters and doesn't from a data standpoint. Now, second big principle, and really this is kind of the big thing here, it's about connectivity and traceability. What we want to do is take the spring stuff over here, and we want to take the wires and connect it into the fall stuff over here. We need to be that literal. And to do that with data, there's certain things about the way data works that you have to structure things in ways that allow you to connect those wires. Okay. And this is these two little sub bullets that are shown there. Number one, if you're connecting data, if you're going to connect data, it requires consistency in your data structure in terms of your language, your terminology, the structuring of the data. So as I come into my fall program and I'm talking about concepts I want to run and plays I want to run, I have a certain language and verbiage there. If I'm doing things in the spring, I need to have a similar type of language over there in what I'm doing. I have to have a direct line. I want to be able to connect this to this. Okay. Now, one of the things we'll show you here in a second when we get into the mechanics that we're talking about is very literal connecting of wires, and we'll show you that. But it's a big thing from a data standpoint. You've got to make sure that you have consistency. You need to adopt your program needs to have a language that you speak, and you speak it in the spring, and you speak it in the season, and you speak it in the summer. You don't have two different languages or three or four. So it's a crucial thing. Just keep that in mind in terms of what you're doing from a data standpoint. Thirdly, this is a big thing that we preach to the guys we work with all the time. And I think there's kind of it's a misunderstood thing. I think that sometimes people equate complexity with intelligence. I'm hoping that's not the case because I'm a fairly simple guy. So I hope it's not a 1-for-1 correlation. But sometimes as coaches, especially now as there's all this analytics stuff and things going on in the world of sports right now. I think people start to think that, oh boy, the more detailed and complex I get, the smarter I am. Well, really, complexity in data is very counterproductive in many ways. And so as we start looking mechanically at things related to what's going on in the spring and in the fall, one of the most powerful things you can do is simplify. If you think about it, we talked about connectivity and traceability. If you have tons and tons of complexity on both sides, then you might have hundreds of wires to connect to bring those two things together. If you can simplify, you might only have to connect 10 wires. It's a whole lot easier and a whole lot more productive. It gets into issues of, and we'll talk this in a little bit, gets into issues of sample size and all these other things. But I think that a lot of times as coaches, we start thinking, man, I'm going to get so detailed and break down so much stuff. But what happens is that tends to be counterproductive. So how do you simplify from a data standpoint? The things we encourage our guys to think about all the time. It's number one, think conceptually. A lot of times coaches tend to get way too specific too early. You're thinking about a specific play call and all these uniques. I want to run this call, which when the rubber meets the road in the fall, yes, you're running plays. I get that. But when you're preparing, it's a whole lot easier to work conceptually. It's a whole lot easier to see if your team is going to be good at running inside zone or outside zone, which is going to be better. It's a whole lot easier to see it at that level, at a concept level, than it is down in the specifics. If you get too down in the weeds, you can't see this picture up above here that's telling you, hey, here's the right thing to do or not to. So think conceptually to the maximum extent possible. Think of your offense, and we'll again look at this in a moment. Think of your offense or your defense from a concept standpoint. Details will fall out of that, but always think conceptually. Second, especially as we're thinking about off-season programs and things, and work in the spring, you got to think contextually. So when I'm putting my spring program together, what I'm doing, you're going to be doing a whole bunch of drills and scrimmage work and all this stuff. It's not actual gameplay, right? But you need to be thinking about structuring things in a way where you understand the context that it applies to. But what I mean by that is when you get into the season, you're very context dependent. And that's very situational is probably another word to say that. You get into the season, you're running certain plays when you're second and long versus second and medium versus third and long in a certain part of the field versus goal line. The context of what's going on matters so much in the fall. Okay. So when you're doing things in the spring, you need to be aware and thinking about context. You need to be thinking about, we're going to do certain things that are directly traceable and applicable to 2nd and 10 situations. So think about concepts, think about context situations. And then you have to have a form of grading. You have to be able to evaluate when something is good or bad. That's in season, that's pretty easy. A lot of guys have methods of doing that in season. Most do, right? With what a good or a bad play is. But you have to be able to look at the things you're doing in the spring and identify what a good or a bad rep looks like. And if you get too detailed with that, again, too much complexity in there makes it just too hard to capture. So we really advocate for just pretty simple grading, pass or fail. Like what I call binary grading. We encourage people in data to tag things with a 1 or a 0. So if you're out there doing a drill with a bunch of your guys and you're tracking how they're doing, it's pass, fail, pass, fail, pass, fail, pass, fail. You get too much more than that. You start thinking, well, that's a C minus. That was a B plus. It's going to take you forever. You're going to be in a whole lot better shape. Just yes, no, pass, fail, pass, fail. So we're going to shift gears. Excuse me. And we're going to look mechanically here for a minute. But before we leave this section again, the big thing that we want to encourage you guys to be thinking about when you talk about a spring program, okay, is about this direct line from what you're doing in February, March, and April, and how that directly impacts what's happening in August and September and October. And I need to be able to connect the two. I've got to be able to see something in what I'm doing over here in the spring and be able to draw a discrete line to how that applies to what I'm doing in the fall. Okay. Now, and again, keep it simple. Keep it simple. Let's talk mechanics. Now we're going to show, and I'm going to go back and forth from this presentation and into Excel and show you some things. So we'll kind of work through things together here a little bit. So now we're going to look at taking those kind of principles and how do you actually capture and do something with data once you're doing that. So look, a couple quick things. Number one is, again, there's a few things in here that are kind of obvious, but I do it just for clarity's sake. Microsoft Excel is a coaching staff's best friend in the spring. I mean, there's a whole lot of analytical platforms and things like that. And if you, I mean, your film system will support a lot of this too. Obviously, you can track data and do all that kind of stuff, but sometimes it's just easiest to just capture data in Excel. Okay. So what I mean by that, and I'm going to pop one open here and we'll look at it. Here's my experience with what I've seen with spring data a lot. Well, so I've seen a whole lot of different things. Number one, I've seen nothing coming out of spring data, and I've seen disjointed messes of data in the spring. I've rarely seen a real put together intentional data structure for a spring football program. Now, no, I'm not saying that as a criticism. I get it. You know, you're coming out of a season, you've been doing all this stuff, and now it's kind of like, hey, man, we're just going out. We're going to play some football. We're going to start, shaking the dust off again, right? but we're advocating to be more intentional than that. So what we advocate for, again, capture data, but keep it all in one single place. Because I can't tell you the number of programs I've seen where you got, boy, this guy over here has got a bunch of stuff he wrote on a piece of paper. This guy over here put some stuff in Excel. This guy tagged about 20% of his stuff in a film system. It's all over the place. Okay. So as a program, you want to have a single repository where, hey, it comes into this format. I don't care if you captured it on a yellow pad of paper. I don't care if that's where you got it. Great. I don't care. But you got to come in here and you got to put it into this master file of data. Okay. So using Excel, but capturing data into a single location is big. I'm going to hit these points real quick. I'm just going to bring them up, not explain them, and then go into Excel and we'll talk about it for a second. So we're going to look at using Excel to capture data. Now, this is kind of the big piece for the connection we'd like to make from the spring to the fall. And that's this. So we encourage you to build what we call a spring practice correlation matrix. I know that's like a big word. That was like, my God, can you make it sound more complicated than that? You just said be simple. And then I call this thing the spring practice correlation matrix. But when you see it, you'll kind of understand. What we do, and again, we'll build one here in a second. You want to cross-reference basically all your concepts and the way you view the world in the fall with the things you're going to do in the spring. Okay. And we're going to cross-reference those two things, and we're going to connect the wires in a table in data. And if you do that, that will establish this direct connection between what you're doing in the spring and why you're doing it in support of what's going on in the fall. Just the act of building that, I think, will do you worlds of good, because it'll force you to think and say, okay, here's what we do in the spring. Why are we doing that? What does that do? And most everything you do is going to have a good spot. It's going to make sense. But there may be certain things you're like, man, I don't know if I can justify the time we were going to spend on that. I don't even see where it really necessarily applies to who we're trying to be in the fall. Maybe that's got to go. Maybe there's something you're not doing that says, maybe you look at something you're doing in the fall and you look back and you say, I don't see anything we're doing in the spring that supports that. Well, then you better add something, or it's going to be wasted time. Okay, so we'll get into that in a second here too. And then thirdly, again, we want you got to keep it simple because it's hard, but you got to try to collect data on every rep. And I know that sounds nuts, but well, for some it won't sound nuts. For some it will. Some people will be like, what? And some will be like, yeah, we do that anyway. But for every drill, scrimmage, exercise that you're doing out there on the field in the spring or in the off season, you need to capture, hey, when did you do it? Who was the player involved? And what was his grade? Was he A, B, or not A, B? Was he pass or fail? Right? Like I said, keep it real simple. Now, you can't do that. You have to coach. That's what you do. You coach, and I would never advocate for a coach to do anything other than what they do well, coach. So you coach, but you got to get a scribe or somebody right there next to you tagging stuff. And some of you guys, depending on what level you are active at, if you're a major college program, you got lots of resources. You got GAs and people like that are already capturing a lot of this data. And you're probably filming every second of practice and going back through the film and looking at it. But if you're a high school program, you probably don't have that luxury. You might capture part of your practice on film, but you probably have plenty of people you could spin up as, student assistants and interns and people like that that come out and can tag data for you, but you got to capture data on what's going on with each rep. Okay, let's dive out of this and let's look at Excel for a second. So this first thing I said, again, so the big principles are, using Excel is just a great recommendation to do just because everybody's got it. You don't need to go learn something new. I mean, everybody's got Excel. Everybody's seen Excel. People get Excel. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You can do a ton of really, really good damage in your spring program just using Excel. But what I mentioned is you want to create what we call this correlation matrix. This is again the foundational piece that can, this is something that does not exist, I would say, in most programs that we've seen. Okay, even at the highest levels, this is not typically something we see, but this is from a data person's perspective. We would advocate for you to do this. you look up here, what we're doing down this down the vertical axis over here on the left, we're characterizing basically conceptual things about who we are as an offense or defense. I mentioned to you before, we encourage you, you got to think conceptually. Another way to think about it is everything over here on the left, down this vertical axis, this is who you are in the fall. This is who you are when it matters. This is who you are when you're playing, XYZ school on a Saturday. The left side, this is us. This is my coaching concept. This is what I believe in. This is who I'm going to be. So what you want to do is you want to characterize. We have two different fields here. One's called effectivity, which is another big word. It's probably bigger than it needs to be, which is just a term that says, okay, what general classification of football does this apply to? So in cases in here, it's like, okay, there's just the field of run pass. Another category might be here's things related to our running game. Here's things related to our passing game. Here's things related to certain situations. Here's things related to our pass defense. You could have another whole section here that's just like, okay, let's look at our run defense. And this is just basically classifications of parts of who we are as an offense or defense, okay? Then next to that, we have the concept. This is where, again, we encourage you to think conceptually. Instead of getting lost in specific plays, we're thinking about concepts. So if I'm looking at the run game section in here, I'm going to list the concepts that I use, want to use, expect to use, plan on being in the fall. So in my run game, we're going to be in it. Sometimes we're going to do inside zone or outside zone or counters or jet sweeps. We're not getting lost in the specific play. We're just saying concept, inside zone running concepts. Here's passing game, concepts in the passing game, quick passes, wide receiver screens, play action passing, general conceptual aspects of that section of our team. Okay. In situations, you might list, we care about goal line situations, possession intent, second and long. You're listing things out. The things that when you're actually playing football for real matter to you conceptually. You list those vertically along this, or down this vertical side of this thing. It's like here's pass defense, cover 1, cover 2, cover 3, certain types of blitzes, concepts. Okay. Then along the top over here, moving horizontally. So if down here, all this is who we are in the fall. All this along the top is what we're going to do in the spring. Okay. So these are the different types of things that we do. Different drills, scrimmages, 5-on-5 this, 7-on-7 this, D-line versus O-line, whatever they are. Okay. And like I said, I'm not a coach, so you'll know what those are better than I do. But I've got different specific drills, and this could go on. I mean, you might have a couple hundred of them. I don't know. But you have all these different things that you may do in the spring that are part of your spring practice program. All right. So you have the spring along the top horizontally. You have who you are in the fall vertically down the left-hand side. Then what you do is you come through this and you just put an X in the box for where it applies. Okay. So if I'm looking at this first type of drill that I do, okay, I might look at this and say, okay, what's this? And I'm so clueless with drills, guys. Maybe it's a offensive line, pass protection drill. Okay, let's use this as an example. I think I may have tried to characterize that in one of these here. So let's say this drill right here is intended to be a drill for, to support our offensive line when they're in pass protection. If that's what the intent of the drills, I go through and I say, okay, what's this apply to? Well, it applies to my passing game. Doesn't really apply to anything in the running game, but in the passing game, it applies a lot to maybe our RPOs and play action passes. In other words, I'm asking myself, hey, if a player is really, really good at this drill, that would seem to be something that would support us. Then he should be pretty good in our play action passing concepts. If he can do this drill well, that's something that has a lot of applicability to what we do over here. So I can start to see, hey, Johnny's pretty good at that. Then when we're in those concepts, those are places where I can use him well. Here's where he might be good or bad. Okay. So again, with any of these things, you're coming through and you're looking at, here's the drill, here's the intent of the drill, here's what it does. if somebody's good or bad at it, it's going to show it should reveal itself in these different aspects of who we are as a team in the fall. Okay. Now, if you're able to do that, it's big because again, if you come through these and you have certain drills and you can't match anything up, then that might be a good candidate to say, let's retire that one and come up with something else. Or you have limited time and limited resources and all that kind of stuff. It might be that you have 2 or 3 things that are all accomplishing the same thing. It might be saying, okay, maybe we don't need to do this one and we'll keep these 2. It can help streamline and tailor what you're doing through the course of the spring. Okay. But we need to have, this is key to the whole thing, is we need to have a direct line from what's happening here in the off season to exactly what we're going to be when the fall comes around. Now, for each one of these, then you're going to be collecting data. So take this first drill A that you have, right? Again, people may be out there in the practice field with a yellow pad or somewhere else capturing data. But what you want to do is get that back into a single file where it gets aggregated. So we would advocate you make these tabs down on the bottom. You make a tab in your master file for each one of these drills. And it's pretty simple. You can get more complex if you want, but you're just listing the date, who the player is, and just he had a rep. It was a 1 or a 0, pass or a fail. Now you can, this result here could be, maybe it was a speed drill or something like that. I don't know. Right. And you have an actual time. You could put the time in there. You could log the result. It was 1.5 seconds or whatever it might be. You do whatever you want. You could add notes. He dropped the ball, whatever. But the big thing is capturing the rep and just getting a simple score, 1, 0, pass, fail, pass, fail. Okay. If you can do that all the way down through these, and again, I know this is not trivial because you have to be able to, be out there collecting this data live during practice. But if you can capture that kind of information, it's huge, because now what we start to be able to see is if I see a guy in a drill or an exercise that we're doing, okay, and I can see how well they perform, I now have a direct path through this to tell me, boy, that really is good from an inside zone running standpoint or whatever it might be. I can make the direct connection between the two. So again, from a mechanical standpoint, use Excel, create a grid, justify what you're doing using this kind of a correlation grid. Okay, where you have what you're doing in the spring is along the horizontal top. Who you are when it really matters in the fall is down the left, and you're cross-referencing those things. Then capture data, however you capture it, but capture data for your reps and get that into this single file. Now, if you can, doing that then allows you, we'll come back over here. We'll start, I know I got a few minutes left, so we'll start to wrap up. Come back where we were. So again, from a structural standpoint, what this does, this allows you to capture data in a way where there's a direct link from spring to fall football. Okay. Now the key is, then you got to leverage it. Okay. And there's a lot of different ways to leverage it. I'm going to show you some examples here, but you can't leverage it if you don't have it. Okay. And if what you end up in the spring is with a kind of a hodgepodge of a mismatch of stuff all over the place on sheets and wherever it might be, you're not going to be able to harness it anyway. And what we want, here's the real end game, is week 1's going to come around, September 1st or 2nd, whenever your first game is going to happen. And what happens, I think, with a lot of teams, and I don't want to overstate it, but I think with a lot, it's probably safe to say that even at the high school level up through the major college level, those first couple games, I think a lot of staffs end up being glorified preseason games to a certain extent. I mean, the problem is you can't afford for them to be preseason games because you got to win. You only get 11, 12 shots at it. You can't afford to waste the first 3 weeks figuring yourself out. You need to be as figured out as you can possibly be by week 1. And I think too many teams spend the first couple weeks figuring themselves out. That's why, a major college team will play an FCS team because it's like, okay, gives us a chance to get some reps because we're not going to lose the game in most cases. But you need to know if you do it right, if you can follow these kind of principles and structure your spring program and capture data in a way that's directly traceable to what you're going to be in the fall, then you can come into week one already knowing what to expect. The more, I say better than you would otherwise. You don't need to take the first couple of weeks to find out who you are. You should know already by what you did in the spring. Now, how do you leverage that? Couple big things. The way you package that data matters. So what I've showed you right there is a way to capture it all. So now you got it all, which is great. Now there's some unique things you can do with it. And I'll show you just a couple real quick. One of the things we do, and again, this is not a glorified sales pitch. It's really not. One of the things we create for our clients are called dashboards. And what a dashboard is really just a way of packaging data. It takes film data and it puts it into a visual platform where you can kind of better understand a story very quickly. But if you structure your spring data right, I'll give you an idea of something you can do with your spring data. So this is an example from this type of an Excel structure I showed you, where we list our drills that we're going to be doing, the things we're going to be involved with in the spring. We cross-reference it with who we expect to be in the fall. We capture all this data. We can package it in ways like this, where we can very quickly come in and look at aspects of our offense or defense that we care about in a very real sense. So let me give you a quick example here. These are like different drills that are shown here. These are different players here. Now, what we do with a dashboard is we try to communicate things visually. And if you're going to communicate visually, you end up using two dimensions. You end up using the dimension of size and color. Okay, so what we do in this case, color tells you if a guy's performing good or bad. So, and that's just based on his average grade of stuff, right? So I can look at grades and I can average those grades. And if a guy is, if the average is 20%, he's going to be red. He's not doing well. If the guy's up over 70%, he's doing good. He's green. So I can start to see who's doing well, who's not, who's struggling. I can start to see time. I can see how we're doing over time. Are we getting better? Are we getting worse? Is a guy improving? Is he not? And because I've built this matrix, I can link it back, not just to some drill, but I can link it back to who I am as a team and who I want to be in the fall. So I can look at things like, let's see this over here. Here's this different structure. You can see what we mentioned, that term effectivity. Here's things related to the passing game. And here's the play action passing concept. And we have a couple of drills we're doing right now that influence that, or that give us a sense of that. If I want to filter this, I can just click on how am I doing on things related to play action passes. Okay, if I click on that, it's going to isolate the type of work we're doing in the spring that's related to play action passes. It's going to show us the guys who have participated in drills and who's doing the best. So this dude Nolan and James have been very good in the drills that support play action passing, where Daniels and Lewis and Fletcher, these guys have been struggling. Okay, I can look at how we're doing over time over the last several weeks in our drills related to play action passing. We're not getting better. We should be getting better. How's Nolan doing specifically? He's been pretty good the whole time. I can start to see it like at my fingertips. Not just, hey, how's the guy doing, but how's what he's doing? How is that directly impacting who I'm going to be on week one? How am I doing on drills related to goal line situations? Here's how we're doing in goal line. We're getting better. We've had a rough couple practices, but look at us. Look at this improvement. It seems like we're doing better. These guys are doing well. So it's a way, there's a lot of different ways to package that where you can very quickly see it and have it at your fingertips where you're looking at instead of just saying, hey, we're doing this, we do a spring program, we do it, and it's day 16 of the spring program. It's almost done. We did it. It was good. We had a good program. This is now very much driving the ship, looking at this thing saying, guys, we're not getting better. This guy's not doing any better. We either got to figure out what we're doing as coaches to coach him better, or we got to say, this dude really needs a lot of work here, or we can't use him in these goal line situations. I can't use Mullins and Quintero in goal line right now because they're not showing me they can do it. But I can use these guys. And knowing that from your spring program and your off-season program, knowing that before week one is huge. So you don't waste week one and week two and part of week three figuring out that these guys aren't the guys that can get it done. Okay. Instead of flying by your gut, it's data that's guiding you. All right. I've gone over by a few minutes. What we'll do is we record these and we can make that recording available to you to go back if you want to go back and look back through some things we talked about. We'll send you the notes. And this, we showed you this template here. It's kind of a recommended way of capturing data in the spring. If you're interested in that, we can send you that copy of that as well. So you have that just as a guide if you want to consider adopting something like that to help you as you go forward. So we'll send that stuff along to you. If you guys, have questions, want to reach out, I mentioned to you at the beginning of this, we said this is not a sales pitch, but we are a company that works with football teams. So if you are in any way interested in more about what we do or taking some of your spring data and helping you get to a spot like this, where you can make sense of your data more quickly, by all means, let us know. That's what we would love to come alongside you, look at some of your data and help you bring that stuff online if you'd be interested in it. Okay. And I'll do this too real quick. I mentioned to you these dashboards. It's always hard when we get somebody on the line. I'll go ahead and show it to you here. I'll take just a quick second and show you kind of what a dashboard is, an in-season dashboard. I'll take just 5 minutes real quick and show you this if you want to stick around. If you can't, I totally get it. Thanks for spending time with us, and we'll follow up with the notes and things. But if you want to stick around for a second, I'll kind of give you a quick idea of what a dashboard is. I kind of, this is how we take and again, I throw around this term dashboard. What that really means is it's just a packaging. It's an application that allows you to tap into all the data you've got and package it in a way that makes it very simple to interpret the story. That's why they call them a dashboard. Like driving in your car, you glance down and you see how fast you're going and if you need gas and that kind of thing. It's just a way of looking into your world of football data and say, hey, here's what is and isn't happening and working. So this is kind of a flavor of how you can do things in the spring. In season, this is an example, I think, of a self-scout dashboard for a team. We're looking at an offense here. Really, again, the principle, it's all adds a picture's worth 1,000 words. So what we do is we tap into film data and we create this visual representation of it. Size and color tell you a story. That's what it's all about. If you can interpret size and color, you'll understand what's going on. So if you look here, you see all these different dots. These are all these plays that this offense ran in this time frame. We go ahead and make this a little bit bigger. So I mentioned size and color. A dark dot is a running play. A blue dot's a passing play. A big dot's a big gain. A little dot's a little gain. So I can kind of get a sense of where we're running plays from, where we had explosive plays. You can see all this information here. But then you'll see all these other sections over here. We call them data grids, where you can package a whole lot of different things you might want to see. In this case, this guy, take the second section over here. It's set up for his offensive formation. So the way you interpret what you see in one of those grids, again, is just size and color. The bigger the box is the more frequently something happened. So if you see a big box, that means it happened a lot. If you see a little box, it means it didn't happen very much. So this is an offensive self-scout for this team. So these two boxes are pretty close to the same size, but this one's actually the biggest. So this double tight formation being the biggest box says that was the formation they were in most often. More than any other one, they were in double tight, and under was close, but they were very seldom in a trips closed because the box is so much smaller. So even though I've never seen this team play it down, I don't know anything about them. I can see very quickly what they do and don't like to do, just visually. That's big, that's small. They like that more than this. Color tells you offensive efficiency in this case. So we use real simple, kind of by default. On first down, if you get 4 yards or more, it's a good play. Less than 4 is not. Second down, get more than half of what's to go, it's good. Less than half is not. Third, fourth down, if you convert, it's good. Otherwise, it's not. So every down distance and gain tells you whether it was a good or a bad play, and we average those. If a team is like 30% or less efficient, it's going to be deep dark red. When a team is like 70+% efficient, it's going to go to deep dark blue. It's like this temperature gauge almost in between there, where yellow's better than red, green's better than yellow, blue's better than green. And so if I understand that dimension, I can very quickly see it's like this thing becomes, we liken it, it's like having an MRI with your offensive defense. You can just look at it and say, boom, right there's our problem. We can look with those two dimensions. I know what a team does and doesn't like to do. and I know where they're good or bad. So looking at this guy overall, his self scout, look at that second formation they run out of. They're great from under. Why? Because it's blue. You can see it's 68.3% efficient, 7.7 yards of play. Now, with the dashboard, if I just click on that, it'll filter it and it'll isolate that in the data. So when I clicked on that, you see how all the plays changed over here? Here's everything they did when they ran from under, and they were great. Basically blue everywhere. Almost everything they did worked and worked really well from under. They should use under more, theoretically, because that wasn't even their bet. That wasn't their top formation they operated from. But when they operated from under, they did everything well. Here they are in double tight. I click on that. So they're less efficient here. It's green. It's not bad. It's green. It's 53%. But this is where you'll start to see contrast and color here. Because if you look at double tight, here's the plays, offensive play right here that they ran from double tight. They were good running outside zone, but Euler and Bengal that they ran were no good. Yellow, red. Look at this Bengal play. 28% red. Now, again, I haven't seen it play. I don't know anything. But the data can tell us that, and a dashboard platform like this can make it scream at you, where you don't have to go dig that up. It's just, this is the MRI. This is, hey, double tight. Yeah, we love operating from double tight, but guys, Bengal is not working from double tight. Okay. Look over here at the hash. When they ran from double tight on the right hash, they were killer. But when they were left hash, middle hash, didn't work. Now, they may or may not see that and know that, but a dashboard can show them that. And you can take something like this. We'll back out of double tight here. If I click on it, it'll just set it back. Let's find that Bengal. Here's Bengal right here. Second most common play, but not good from double tight. I could look at it from that perspective and just click on Bengal. Here's every time they ran Bengal. And look at this here. See how double tight sticks out? But look at, if you run Bengal from trips, pro, under, all good. Just don't run it from double tight. And don't run it on first down. Okay. So that fast, the dashboard can let you see things in data. So it's the same kind of principle here. Again, as we get back to the spring program, is if you capture data, you can make a direct link into your real program in the fall. And you can use tools like dashboards to very quickly digest it, see it, and act on it. That's simple. So listen, I appreciate you guys taking the time. Again, you see that dashboard. If that's of any intrigue to any of you guys out there, by all means, we do this all the time. You can send us some data. We're happy to spin it up into one, send it back to you, let you go play around with it, see if it's something that might work for you. But thanks for taking time. If you guys have questions at all, you can feel free to kind of interject or use the chat box. But otherwise, I appreciate you guys taking time. And we'll look forward to crossing paths with you again soon. Thanks much, guys. Take care.